everyone. I'm Ari Goldberg, the host of Simply Science, and I'm here today because Simply Science is getting a bit of a makeover. Of all the topics we've covered over the years, climate change might be the most important. I mean, in many ways, it could be considered the major existential threat of our times. So, we have decided to focus specifically on this issue. Awareness about sustainability, its impact on our world, and certainly our own New York communities is the order of the day. So, I'd like to introduce you now to the show's new host on all things sustainability, our own Tria Case. Tria is the Executive Director of the Office of Sustainability and Energy Conservation for CUNY. For the last 17 years, Tria has been leading sustainability measures and actions into CUNY campuses and our city by helping to create the pathways that can help us all transition to a cleaner, greener quality of life. Tria, I hand the show over to you.
Thank you, Ari. And thank you to Simply Science for your support. We're excited to start a new show on CUNY TV that brings in experts in areas like wind, solar, water, and recycling, just to name a few, because these are the solutions that will help us fight climate change. Today, we will be discussing the current state of offshore wind energy, and we have a handful of guests to delve deeper into this new frontier. But first, Ari will give us an overview of what offshore wind energy looks like in the world, and more specifically, in New York.
Humans have been using the power of wind for thousands of years, from ancient Mesopotamian sailboats to medieval European windmills. And today, wind power creates over 6% of the world's electricity, and over 10% in the United States. And it does so with a lifetime carbon footprint that is 99% less than coal-burning power plants at that. Much of the world's electricity today is generated by a process called electromagnetic induction, whereby moving a magnet around a coil of wires, or a coil of wires around a magnet, the electrons in the wire are pushed by the magnetic field, creating electricity. A spinning turbine, of course, is perfect for keeping magnets and wires moving around each other. The only question, then, is what's the best way to get a turbine spinning? Well, wind is one option, free and abundantly blowing all the time, if we can harness it. And that began with the first wind turbine to produce electricity in 1887 in Scotland. But interest in America on a nationwide scale really started to take off in the 1970s, as skyrocketing gas prices had people searching for energy alternatives. And today, less than 140 years after that first turbine, there are over 70,000 across America, which, at maximum capacity, could power 43 million homes. Of course, the wind isn't blowing at a maximum all the time, but at average capacity, it's estimated the average wind turbine is generating enough power for more than 940 homes every month. As such, it's currently the fourth largest energy provider in the nation, behind natural gas, coal, and nuclear, and it's only increasing. And as it does, so does its technology, specifically with a strong emphasis now on offshore wind farms, out on the ocean where they're less intrusive, and there's more wind, as opposed to more traditional land-based ones. It's a relatively new industry, with the first offshore wind farm in the US debuting only in 2016. But under a Biden administration initiative, the goal is powering 10 million homes with just offshore wind by 2030. And New York City is at the forefront, part of its own goal to reach 100% clean energy by 2040. There are 5 offshore wind farms being planned off the coast of Long Island in the next several years, the single largest offshore wind project in the nation, with the first opening already this year. To put in perspective just how large this all is, currently, all of New York State's land-based wind farms have a capacity of generating about 2,200 megawatts, while the plan for New York's offshore wind farms is to total 9,000 megawatts by 2035. But of course, the impacts are not only on our climate and our power grid, but on our economy too.
But not only green jobs, but green dollars.
NYC has committed to investing $191 million into offshore wind projects over the next 15 years. And according to NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, their expectation is a $12.1 billion impact to the state's economy, as these projects aim to create thousands of jobs, with a further stated goal specifically delivering significant economic benefits to disadvantaged communities. Time will tell if the city, and country for that matter, end up meeting all of these intertwined climate, energy, and socioeconomic goals. But however it plays out, one thing is for sure. The next decade is going to be a very busy one for wind power. For Sustainability Matters, I'm Ari Goldberg.
Joining me now to delve deeper into offshore wind energy is Bram Peterson, a program manager for large-scale renewables at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, known as NYSERDA. Welcome, Bram.
Thanks for having me.
Bram, Ari just talked to us about how there are 2,200 megawatts of wind power being generated across the state. What does that mean to us? Can you help us understand what that means in terms of maybe homes that are powered?
Sure, yeah. So today, New York has 26 operating wind projects spread throughout 12 counties in northern and central and western New York. These can range from a few dozen to a few hundred megawatts each, and each megawatt is capable of powering about 250 homes annually due to New York's wind resource. So altogether, our operating pipeline or fleet of land-based wind projects generates enough energy to power 500,000 homes annually in New York.
Wow. We understand that there's about 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind planned. So when I think about that, I think about how are we going to get that into the grid? How are we going to make sure that we have the workforce that's going to make that happen? Can you tell us a little bit about how NYSERDA is helping us to realize those goals?
Sure. So one of NYSERDA's key missions is ensuring the state remains on a trajectory to install 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. We currently have New York's first offshore wind project under construction today. So that's the 130 megawatt South Fork wind project, which will be our first operating wind project in the state. And over the past 5 years, we've contracted with 4 major offshore wind projects, which will total over 4,300 megawatts once operational. So that'll get us halfway almost to that goal already. These projects will be located off the coast of Long Island in Massachusetts and will be directly interconnecting into New York City and New Jersey. And once operational by the end of the decade, we'll be capable of powering over 3 million homes in New York. NYSERDA's role here is that we procure these projects and purchase from them over the term of 25 years the environmental attributes associated with the wind power, such that they have that financial surety to come to New York and invest in these projects and ultimately bring them to operation over the course of their lifetimes.
What does that mean in terms of jobs? Are those companies working with NYSERDA to help bring folks in and train them and working with communities?
Absolutely. So as part of these long-term contracts that they've entered into with NYSERDA, aside from building and operating the projects themselves, they've made large commitments to ensure that over $12 billion is directed specifically to New York in terms of economic benefits to the communities hosting these projects and short and long-term employment opportunities for New Yorkers. So as part of these projects, they were not only building the projects themselves, but we're building manufacturing, staging, and marshaling facilities both in upstate and downstate New York, and we'll be building long-term operations and maintenance hubs in both Brooklyn and in Long Island. And a key component of these contracts is not only hiring New Yorkers, but hiring local New Yorkers that are from historically underserved communities, and bringing residents from these neighborhoods that are hosting components of these projects into the fold, into the offshore wind workforce, such that they have the first crack at participating in this new industry that's coming to New York.
That's exciting. How is that helping New York City's grid? How does that help us, for example, meet our goals and targets around greenhouse gas emissions? Many people know about Local Law 97. How does offshore wind help us with those goals?
Yeah, so these offshore wind projects have a great inherent benefit in that they're sited so close to New York City and Long Island, regions of New York that have historically not been able to utilize renewable energy compared to regions of upstate New York. So by being able to come in and interconnect directly to the grid in New York City and Long Island, we'll not only be able to bring that renewable energy to where it's needed most, but at the same time, wane the city off of its fossil fuel emitting resources. These incumbent power plants have oftentimes been operating for generations, and the residents of the communities hosting these projects have for many generations suffered some acute health impacts due to their proximity from these pollutions. So we have the benefits of being close to the resource itself and waning off of that fossil fuel emitting energy. You mentioned Local Law 97, great ambitious law that New York City is using to tackle and curb its greenhouse gas emissions. NYSERDA is already playing a role in opening up opportunities to comply with that law. While it's mostly targeted at energy efficiency and building decarbonization efforts, we do plan to make these renewable energy credits available for purchase in New York, allowing building owners that have historically not been able to source their energy from renewables to make that switch for the first time. So NYSERDA's Tier 4 program is bringing clean energy from upstate New York and Canada directly into New York via our major Champlain Hudson Power Express and our Clean Path New York projects, and ultimately offshore wind projects may also be able to contribute if those ORECs are eventually made eligible for sale in New York City as well.
How does offshore wind help with grid constraints? So, sometimes we're on those hot days during the summer when we're struggling to meet the demand of all that's happening on the grid.
So on those hot days when we're struggling to find enough power, that's oftentimes because we cannot get enough power from upstate New York or from our neighboring regions. So again, having that power 20, 30 miles offshore connecting directly into New York will be able to ensure we have sufficient capability on those days and will allow us to not fire up the dirtiest, most polluting power plants, often called peaker plants, which are scattered throughout New York City and Long Island. Offshore wind will have the direct effect of making sure that we have to use those facilities less and less as time goes on and we're delivering more offshore wind into the city.
We know that wind power will help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Can you talk a little bit about the environmental impacts of deploying those wind turbines themselves out there in the ocean?
Yeah, of course. So NYSERDA has played a role in this since 2016, wherein we launched our first offshore wind master plan. This was comprised of more than 20 studies exploring the feasibility of offshore wind in New York, a number of which zoomed in on these environmental factors. So studying potential impacts on marine mammals and turtles, on birds and bats, on fisheries and fishery stocks, making sure that we're working with the federal government to ultimately recommend areas for offshore wind development in the areas that are most suitable for it and avoiding impacts in areas where we would be better served to avoid. So those studies continue to inform offshore wind development today. We're undertaking our second master plan currently, Offshore Wind Master Plan 2.0, which is going to be focused on siting floating offshore wind in the deeper waters off the coast, and at the same time continuing to study the sites that we currently have for development. So as these go to construction and operation, we want to make sure that we're continuing to track wildlife and migration patterns, that we're doing acoustic modeling, that the developers are committing funds to ensure that while they're servicing these projects, they're looking for unforeseen impacts. So all of these are going to be moving in tandem while we both look for new opportunities for offshore wind and making sure we're getting this first suite of projects right in the process.
Thank you, Bram, for coming to Sustainability Matters and for all that you're doing to help New York State reach its wind energy goals. Now we're going to take a specific look at how Kingsborough Community College is gearing up to provide training in offshore wind energy. Here is John Napo, who is the director of the Maritime Technology Program at Kingsborough, to talk about the new and exciting careers opening up for CUNY students.
You're both going the same exact speed, so somebody's got to slow down. And let the other guy go forward. The Kingsborough Community College Maritime program has been training mariners for about 35 years. The wind energy sector has a different set of requirements, and it's a perfect fit for us to become what we call a global wind organization training center, where we still do the maritime component, where we teach students how to run different types of vessels in and around New York Harbor, but the additional component will be teaching them to work in and around wind turbines. The wind turbines that will be off New York State are all going to be between 18 and 30 nautical miles offshore. And so the only way they get there to build them and to service them is via some type of specialized craft. So here at the college, the funding is going to pay for 3 major components. The first one is the Global Wind Organization training component, and that is we need a tower to train people to climb at heights and how to rappel down from that height at a certain level using different personal protective equipment. Also, if someone's injured on a wind turbine, they need to get that person off the wind turbine to safety. BST, which is basic survival training. It's pool training and training here in Jamaica Bay. Should you have to go into water, how do you get out of the water safely? Training how to deal with a fire. And so we'll be teaching people how to put fires out on a wind turbine. And then we are building a simulator also for a specific craft called a crew transfer vessel. And that vessel's job is to take turbine technicians from the shore to the wind turbines to maintain the turbines. So there's going to be people working on the turbines themselves. There's going to be people driving the vessels to get the people that work on the turbines. And then the support staff to maintain all of this equipment on land is it's going to be phenomenal. I think the wind energy industry in general is going to have some problems with recruiting technicians to work on the turbines. The turbines we're talking about off of Long Beach, Long Island, which will service New York City, the scope of them is pretty amazing. They're going to be like 800 feet high, and they will move around a lot. And so seasickness is a component, and plus the height is a component. So yeah, the individual needs that skill set. But if you can get past the training tower, the Global Wind Certificate that you'll get will allow you to work on vessels without actually ever getting on the turbine itself. Kingsborough's workforce development team is really, really very good at reaching into the community and getting individuals who have no idea, one, that there's a job in the maritime industry, or two, that there's a job in the maritime industry in the wind energy field. So we are going to focus a lot of our recruitment in those disadvantaged communities and try to make advantages and get people into a career that they don't even know exists right now. And so we're pretty excited about that. The transition to wind energy for New York City is going to be a difficult one, just because of the way the city is laid out. But it's exciting to have a secondary source of energy. And I think that once we figure out how to get more hybrid vehicles on the road, the wind energy program is kind of like free in a way. I mean, there's cost to install them and to maintain them. But if you can plug your car in from energy that's being made by a wind turbine, it's a win-win for everybody.
There are many great career paths with wind energy, and to tell us more about them, I am joined in the studio by Lauren Andersen, who is CUNY's Associate Provost of Careers and Industry Partnerships. Welcome, Lauren. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So we just heard about how Kingsborough is training students in the careers associated with wind energy. Tell us a little bit about how your office is linking programs like that with industry and ensuring that students have jobs.
Absolutely. So truly, the career success of students has been written into CUNY's DNA since day one, since the founding of the Free Academy 175 years ago, when the folks who were founding the school really said that the purpose of it was to qualify people for a first-rate public education, regardless of means of background, that would qualify them for usefulness hereafter. Mm-hmm. And there was really a focus on what students were going to do once they left the doors. So this is not a new concept at all for CUNY, but our chancellor has really made this a priority university-wide. So about a year ago, he established the Office of Careers and Industry Partnerships, which works across CUNY to ensure that more of our students can connect to jobs more quickly at salaries that are sustainable, but also to make sure that as part of that, we're really working with industry to make sure that we're fueling the growth of businesses. Mm-hmm. Because if businesses see CUNY as a partner and they turn to us and they're able to find the talent, the expertise, the resources they actually need to grow, they're going to grow with our input and grow more inclusively and create more jobs and come back to CUNY to offer those jobs to students. Mm-hmm. So we are really focused in our office on creating partnerships that serve all of CUNY. Mm-hmm. Some of those partnerships can be with groups of employers, like the CEO Jobs Council is one that we work with. And some of those partnerships also are meant to create partnerships at the level of each campus. So we launched something called the CUNY Inclusive Economy Initiative, which actually places industry specialists in different sectors, including green energy, onto campuses to do that work. So my role is to support this work across the board, and a lot of my job is meeting with employers to understand their needs, understand what they're looking for, meeting with campuses to understand how they could incorporate more career-connected learning into their work and what supports they need and what challenges they face. And then a big part of my job is actually working with the state and the city, because what happens to CUNY students doesn't just affect those individual students. It really affects all of their communities, the city, the state. And so the city and state are very interested in working to support how we ensure that more of our students are actually connecting to the careers they want to pursue when they leave our doors.
And the city and the state have been very supportive, in particular around wind energy, actually, at
Very.
CUNY. Can you talk a little bit about some of the programs and the efforts going on around the university related to wind energy?
Yes, definitely. So we are very fortunate in that over the past couple of years, we've gotten $10 million in support from the state, thanks to the member of the Assembly, Jamie Williams, who's really been pushing for a lot of that. And then we also got support from the city, an equal $10 million to support offshore wind development in the community college system that we have. And so both our senior colleges and our community colleges have recently received support to build out the kind of facilities that are necessary to train the workforce of tomorrow. Because really for these jobs, understanding applications and having a chance to do hands-on work is really important. So I know you talked a little bit about Kingsborough and the work they're doing on the CUNY 1, the boat, but there are other examples on land, like CSI just launched or is going to be launching a number of labs that are meant to really simulate what does it look like to get data feeds from these offshore wind institutions, and how can you use that to simulate different types of scenarios you might find when you're working with offshore wind fields. So there are a lot of examples like that across the board. And then in addition to sort of what do we build to help New Yorkers understand how to do this work, there's the programming itself. So we also have a lot of degree and non-degree programs that help people understand their jobs. And even one step before that, how do they even know anything about the industry?
Right.
And it's industries that are being fueled by CUNY researchers.
Yeah. Is there an example that you can think of around the research side that?
Well, just to give you an example, so when people think of offshore wind, they think of the turbines, but they don't always think about where does that energy go? How does it come back to shore? How do you store it somewhere? And we have some fabulous researchers across CUNY who are really thinking about creative energy storage at scale. What do batteries look like that can hold this scale of energy? How does it be passed into the grid versus storage? How does that timing cycle work? And our researchers are actually at the vanguard of thinking about all of these pieces.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we think about offshore wind, we think about the folks who are climbing up the towers, but at the end of the day, that's intermittent power, right? The wind isn't blowing all the time.
Yeah, well, what I think is so exciting in the space of renewable energy, and offshore wind in particular, is that the jobs we're talking about are not one job. The kinds of jobs that are going to be created, up to 10,000, I understand from our state colleagues, are really varied. Everything from, how do you plan these farms requires attorneys, requires financial analysts, requires policy folks, to, okay, what happens when we're going to maintain it in the long run, requires not only the folks who are going to service the turbines, but also who's on land, like gaining entry to the ports, overseeing the ports, dock hands to make sure the ships are loaded with the right equipment, sensitive equipment that costs a lot of money. There are a lot of opportunities for people to get involved.
Thank you, Lauren, for taking the time to be here with us today and for sharing all of your great work. I really appreciate your coming here today and being with us, and look forward to continuing to work together with you to make a difference here. Thank you. And now let's see how one student, Ashley Bailey, an environmental engineering student at City College of New York, who is graduating this May, utilized the classroom resources and campus partnerships to gain experience and make contributions to the wind energy industry.
As a student, I would start by going to the Career Center because they have a lot of resources that could help students get their foot in the door, from internships to even full-time opportunities. And with me, with offshore wind, I really had the privilege to intern for VHB, a civil engineering consulting firm. I helped with stakeholder mapping and writing memos. And one of the projects that I helped with is projected to be placed in the New York Bight, which is really exciting. So I'm able to see the process of a big offshore wind project come into development. Offshore wind companies works hand in hand with fisheries and researchers to ensure that the marine life is not impacted. So this is an area I am particularly interested in. I also was able to attend webinars and go to different networking events to continue to grow my knowledge. I was a research fellow for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA. They have a division at the CCNY campus. I was able to learn about air quality and air composition in the New York City area. And with that, I was able to, in first place, my presentation, because I learned so much and was able to grasp so many concepts in regards to enforcing a more sustainable future. Being a climate policy fellow in the Colin Powell School, interacting with different students of different majors, we are all aware of climate change. And all we want to do is to ensure that everyone else is aware of it and we are reducing the carbon emissions and any greenhouse gases that are affecting the environment.
Our guests touched on some of the many careers in the wind industry, and there are a lot of choices, from entry-level technicians to civil, environmental, and electrical engineers, to those who want to work in sales, analytics, and project management. You can find more about career options on the Department of Energy website and explore the many courses, undergraduate and graduate degrees that CUNY has to offer at cuny.edu. We want to keep the conversation going after our show, so follow us or send us a message on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you for watching, and please tune in next month for our next Sustainability Matters, where we'll be discussing solar energy in the city.